The NXF, or the National LGBT Federation, which we say NXF for short, was founded in 1979, and we've been involved in marriage equality from the very, very beginning. So if I sound like a chipmunk on speed trying to summarise that last 10-year journey, then work with me on that. But just to give a little bit of context about what the organisation is about, we are an Irish community organisation striving to advance equality and end discrimination of LGBT people in Ireland and internationally. And we aim to achieve that through social change, through advocacy, publications, digital platforms, symposia, events that celebrate our very vibrant and diverse community, as well as being a dysfunctional family. So some of our activity includes, on the publication side, we publish GCN. It is the oldest free LGBT community magazine in the world, of which we're very proud. We organise the galas, which is the National LGBT Awards, which were set up to honour and celebrate all of the individuals and organisations who are committed to advancing social equality for LGBT people. And we're also involved in research, policy and advocacy work. And some of the pieces that we've just more recently been involved in, we've just launched a Road to Equality exhibition, which honours and celebrates the 40 years of activism that it took to take this road to equality. We've had research conferences like Outing Exclusion, and as Orla just mentioned, we've just published Burning Issues 2, because you'll hear a little bit about Burning Issues 1 shortly, which is the biggest national survey ever conducted in LGBT Ireland. So given that we've been around since 1979, it's probably no surprise that the NXF was a founding partner of the marriage equality movement. The NXF was represented on the CAL campaign by Alva Smith, who I know that you met yesterday, and then we became founding members of Marriage Equality as an organisation in 2007. We were also the fiscal agent for marriage equality in those early years, which made us really important because we controlled the money. But possibly more important than controlling the money, I think, is that the NXF facilitated some of the really earliest debate about marriage equality through two national symposia that we organised, one of which was called Marriage Matters in 2007 and 2009. And I would say those early discussions framed and shaped the very language, debate and culture of the campaign. And this is a quote from Alva Smith, and I think this is really important because this was the beginning of framing the debate as a human rights and equality issue. And I think framing that issue in this broad equality context from the outset would go on to be pivotal to the success of the campaign. And just in terms of your learning, and you know, Gráinne and the leaders had asked us to kind of focus on what you might learn. And I think that's a really interesting question to ask yourself. Well, what is the wider context that your campaign fits into? Is it human rights and equality? What is it? How can you frame your campaign as part of a wider context that people will relate to? Because people relate to human rights and equality. So that's just an important question to ask. The early symposia that we ran also provided information. It mapped that whole legislative framework and landscape for the LGBT community as a whole. It provided a forum for the exchange of information and dialogue between interested LGBT groups and organisations, community groups, individuals, anybody who really wanted to get involved. And it developed a platform that way that fostered key working relationships and collective strategic thinking. And I don't think those pieces are important. Key working relationships and collective strategic thinking. It eventually led to what we called the Platform for Equality. Orla mentioned the development of the support of a wider coalition of organisations, and they would prove fairly vital, particularly in the latter stages of the campaign. But most importantly, I think it brought together a huge range of perspectives, and to be aware that there are always a range of perspectives. You can call them dysfunctional or not, but people will come to the party from very different places. And we presented the marriage equality from those different perspectives, looked at the international success stories and the not success stories, the feminist perspective, which wasn't signed up to the whole marriage idea and the institution of marriage, to include the voice of children. So I think that framing and shaping piece was really key, and all of those core principles that you see there would go on to become key tenets of the marriage equality campaign. So just some of the learning from those early symposia is people and organisations want to be involved. They want to be included. So include them, inform them and empower them. And the very flip side of that is that not everybody wants to get on the train with the masses, and that's okay too. Let them steer their own ship. There's a lot of vehicle analogies going on there, and maybe that's apt. people are in different vehicles, allow for those different approaches and those different perspectives, because your audience have different approaches and different perspectives. So it is a good thing that people cater for those diversity of approaches and perspectives. So the NXF was also involved in a number of other initiatives that I think greatly contributed to the campaign for marriage equality as a whole, including GCN. GCN is that publication that is the oldest LGBT publication in the world, and they played a very significant part in facilitating the debate and the discussion on the issue of marriage equality. There were multiple GCN features, editorials, which served to inform and engage the LGBT community, and that was really important to keep the issue current and constantly in focus. The magazine also gave insight into all the political machinations, and there were a lot of political machinations. So it gave a little insight into them as the various government and parties literally inched their way towards marriage equality over the decades. They conducted a lot of interviews with all of the political leaders and well-known commentators so that they could speak directly to the LGBT community. And essentially they acted as a media hub for the movement in the run-up to the campaign. In that 10-year small run-up to the campaign, they were a trusted provider of information. And essentially all of the organisations who were involved in marriage equality used GCN to get their message across to the LGBT community. During the campaign itself then, I would say GCN provided a really important commentary that was separate to the mainstream media coverage of the referendum. And it was coming from an insider perspective, and it provided that safe space that was much more important to us than I think we realised that it would be, but it was really important to have that safe space. A welcome rebuttal to the messages from the No campaign, and unlike other media outlets, didn't feel duty-bound to constantly provide what was called balance at the time. We didn't necessarily see it as balance. But essentially GCN is an archive of the journey that led Ireland to achieving constitutional marriage equality for lesbian and gay couples from the perspective of the LGBT community. This is a slide of the celebratory, it's a threefold cover of the celebratory issue that we launched or that we released the day after the result came out. It was launched the day after the result came out, which meant that we had to have a magazine ready to go in the event of a yes victory and in the event of a no. And it was really hard for the team to put together that magazine in the event of the no. This was a magazine, an issue that the GCN team themselves were really proud of. It's a really glossy threefold cover. It looks really great. And they were really proud of it coming out. We were really proud of it coming out. One of the lessons is lots of people loved this. They rushed, people were still on a complete high the day after. They rushed to get a copy of it, and we thought, oh, well, this is great. But there was also a huge backlash about this. People were annoyed about who was on the cover, who wasn't on the cover. People were annoyed about who was in the magazine, who wasn't in the magazine. Here's the message: people will get annoyed. And we have a saying in English, you can't do right for doing wrong. And there's just a lesson there. And on the GCN side, and Grania knows this, GCN played that huge role in the run-up to the campaign, but then they weren't included in the main Yes Equality Communications media plan. You can understand from their perspective, they weren't best pleased about that. You've learned loads about how successful the Yes Equality Communications plan was and how successful it was executed, so you can understand that they needed to do what they needed to do from their perspective. Again, people weren't happy. Here's the point. You will sometimes make decisions that upset people. They might even hurt people. You won't start off with the intention that they will hurt people. People will get upset and they will get hurt. You just need to know, well, what's your plan to deal with that? Is that important? Is the end game the most important? Or do you actually have to mind people as you go along? But you need a plan as to how you will deal with that. And just remember the piece that you can't do right for doing wrong. Other contributions that the NXF made, Orla talked about Burning Issues 2, which we've just launched in the last month. In spring 2009, the NXF conducted what was then the largest national survey of the LGBT community, and at that time that was called Burning Issues. The key finding was that securing full and equal access to the institution of marriage was the third highest priority in the quantitative kind of ranking after equal rights at work and personal security. When you went to the open-ended questions, then marriage equality and securing rights to the institution was actually the top priority for respondents, and civil partnership, which was on the agenda at the time, was just the 12th priority. So that will show you the difference at that point. But I suppose the point about it is the outcomes from the Burning Issues survey were used extensively by Marriage Equality and countless other organisations to seek support on the issues of marriage equality among all sectors of society, but particularly among politicians. The second piece, the galas, they're the National LGBT Awards, and they promote visibility and a celebration of diversity. And that's really important, visibility and a celebration of diversity, because they are both very key precepts in building the platform for the societal acceptance of marriage equality. And so they were started a number of years before the marriage equality referendum, and I think they played quite a key role in the visibility piece. On our actual campaign itself, which was called Yes by 10 for marriage equality, we delivered that campaign. It was based on the premise that while organisations and activists had laid the foundations for the success of the referendum, ultimately to get the vote over the line, it was vital that individuals took personal responsibility for securing the votes of their the persons in their personal circle. It targeted people who wanted to do more but who maybe couldn't get involved at a strategic level or at a very detailed level, but it empowered every single person who wanted to do more to do that in a very simple way, but in a very effective way. We couldn't convince your family, your friends, your granny to vote yes, but you could. And this was all about personal story, about human story. I would say most things are. But this basically gave people a tool to tell their personal story and gather votes as they went. We simply asked people to have conversations with 10 people that they knew about voting yes, to secure 10 people that they knew to vote yes, and here was the crux, to take responsibility for making sure 10 people that they knew got to the polling station to vote yes. Very simple, all on the basis of the 10 people. So we provided people with these branded mechanisms. There was a poster, a leaflet, this list piece where people could, actually fill out, well, who are my 10 people, and make this concrete, and there was a list of 10 reasons there. The campaign was hugely shared online, and people could fill out these materials both online, and there were also printed format of it, but it was actually a really important tool for canvassers, because a lot of us as canvassers met people on the door who said, oh, I'm definitely voting yes, but I really want to do more. And that person is great to meet, but they could potentially really delay you on the door. So a lot of the canvassers simply handed over our Yes by 10 material and said, that's brilliant. If you can get 10 people, your 10 people to vote yes, then you'll be doing a great job. And they were able to move on. So the marriage equality campaign is very rightly lauded as a phenomenal success. Because we were founded in 1979 and have been involved for a very long time, I would say the effort that led to that victory started at least 40 years ago with people who had the courage to live open, visible lives in more difficult times. But maybe the learning on that front is that there are always existing platforms and always existing alliances that created those platforms. Use them. People want to be included. They just need to be empowered to be included. We were able to lend our long-standing history and of activism and advocacy, as well as our credibility to the campaign. It is but one chapter in our history, but it's a very proud one. And I would wish you all very big success in this chapter in your history and in the campaigns that you're going to be involved in. Thank you.